Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to another part of the King's Indian attack speedrun. I finally done a little bit more research on how to construct an effective version of these openings. So I feel a little bit better about that. This time we're getting something kind of like a Sicilian. This is called the Ready Open Sicilian Invitation. And essentially what we're going to be doing here is trying to use this long diagonal to our benefit. And it feels like our opponent definitely allowed this. There's two ways we can play. So now that kind of like we've both kind of have chosen where we want to go in this opening, where should we construct our attack? This is kind of like a quiz for you guys. And the way you can do this, if you're not sure, look at where your furthest pawn is, or look at where your central pawn chain is kind of pointed. When we look at the central pawn chain, what you can do is look at the base of it and then draw an arrow. And actually that arrow is very effective to see where you should be facing. So by playing this move c4, generally you're going to be playing on the queen side because the base of the pawn chain is going diagonally towards the queen side. So moves like knight d2 make sense, attacking b7. So do moves like a3 going for b4. So I'm just going to play a3. And they allow me to play b4, so I don't see the harm in that. They could play some sort of d5. This looks really sketchy. And I feel like there's going to be a tactic involved with knight takes e5 here. So I'm just going to jump in and play it. Because the problem is this bishop is eyeing this rook. And they have to deal with this in some way. And this feels like they're going to be losing something. So they can take on e5, and after I take on a8, they can win the b4 pawn at the end of the day. So here we can go for the massive amount of material with knight c6, where after queen e8, we take the bishop, and then we take on a8. And again, I want to go for, hey, if you want to go into this imbalance, prove your compensation. I'm going to have to get rid of my light squared bishop, which I think is like, okay, at least they try to get something for it, but it's not going to be enough. Oh, wait. Oh, by the way, I hope you guys like the shirt. It's flamingos. Might be hard to see. I need to like improve. I need to get it like a better camera. Also, new hat came in. I don't know. I use this hat a lot, right? And I love it. But I thought I would try something a little different as well. I was, you know, want to look fancy for you guys. I want to look cute for my homies. You guys are my homies. So I want to take, but I also don't want to. If I take, should I ever be afraid of bishop h3, I think is the main question. And I'm not sure. What if I just play something like king g2, and then I play like e4? And then the idea with e4 is also knight d5, and just trying to control all the light squares. I think that's a very effective strategy. Let's play king g2. King g2 is just covering some more light squares. Okay, now that they played knight e5, I'm thinking of playing e4, and e4 is like the main idea behind it is actually, ooh, I gotta be careful with that. That's a good move. Do I want to play something like rook e1 or even f4? Because if bishop h3 check and then I go back, oh wow, I don't want to start allowing things. Maybe I should just go rook e1. But rook e1 allows bishop g4. Uh-oh. I should have spent a little bit more time here. I'm going to play f4. The thing is, since we're up 3 points of material, if this ends up giving back material, that's not actually a problem for us. The biggest problem is somehow if we get checkmated. So with this move f4, I'm trying to argue, hey, I have f5 coming. You have to deal with this. So bishop h3 check, king g1, and your knight's hit. So you have to move your knight somewhere that you might not want to move it. Knight to g4 looks very effective, though. I would assume that they want to move their knight there, if anything. But I can play rook e1, and all of their pieces are kind of like tripping over the same squares. So king g1 here. If they take on f1, I'm actually going to take on e5 because I'm attacking the knight on f6 and I'm still attacking the bishop on f1. Is that a safe choice? We'll have to see. This is the materially minded choice, however, and I would love to stay materially minded for the series. Maybe things will change when we get around 1600. Generally, I'm trying to stick to this method of thinking until we get punished for it. If we start getting punished for it in these games, then it's time to switch our strategies. But hey, we haven't been punished so far. Whenever we've given up our light square bishop, it's not an easy decision to go for, but we do get an exchange, and if we can prove that we're safe, then, well, things can definitely go our way. So again, knight to g4, and I'm thinking of rook e1, and all of a sudden, after rook to e1, I do have threats like e5 in the position. I could also try something like knight e5, trying to simplify things. When we take pieces off the board, that's going to help us a lot because they're going to have less attacking pieces. So that's important. We could have always thrown in this b takes c5, but after d takes, it kind of like this pawn. We're trying to say if we end up taking, we're saying that b4 is less valuable than d6, and in some cases that'll be true, right? So trading a flank pawn for a central pawn can be a very effective strategy and something that's great for us. But sometimes it just opens lines against us, right? After c takes and d takes, all of a sudden the d pawn becomes weak. We do have knight d5 though to plug in the weakness, but these are all things you have to keep in mind whenever you're considering trades of any sort, whether it's a pawn trade or whatever. Pawn trades are interesting, right? People always think, oh, I'm trading this pawn for this pawn. At least that's how I used to think when I started. And then I came to the, like, I think it was like a chess network video. Shout out to Jerry, by the way. Amazing teacher. But if you ever end up in scenarios where you are trading a pawn and there's like a bunch of pawn tension like this, just remember, if you take, you're not actually trading this pawn for this pawn unless they recapture with a piece. If they recapture with a pawn, you're actually trading that pawn for whatever other pawn there was, because this pawn will remain, right? If takes and takes, that pawn remained on c5. It's just that these two came off the board. So that's a very good visualization technique to use, and you should again evaluate these pawns, not these ones. Same thing if they take here. I think this would be a mistake for them because then they're trading this beautiful c5 pawn for this a3 pawn, which is just purely defensive, covering b4. So they're spending some time here wondering if they should take or not. I think that's a very good decision on their part to wait. I think that the problem is, though, taking on e5 is extremely strong. And even if they get the light squared bishop out of it, they move back. So this makes sense, actually. They want to take and then take on f1. But at the same time, I'm going to take and then I'm going to take back on f1. And as we can see here, I'm actually just up a straight up piece rather than the exchanges up before. Because they got the exchange back, but they got the exchange for two pieces, which sometimes can be an equal amount of material. But here that's not really the case, right? Because I was up in exchange to begin with. So remember, whenever you're trading pieces off, you have to ask yourself what's on the board still, not just what came off. So I'm thinking of bishop d2. I want to connect the back rank. I'm worried of some sort of like f5, and if I take, then rook e1 check. So bishop d2 is a purely defensive move, just covering the back rank now. And it's also leaving tension. Again, this trade would benefit me, and this trade could potentially benefit them. So I'm not really in a rush to do anything about the tension. The only time you should really clear up tension in a position isn't when you're uncomfortable, because that's the easy thing to do. Instead, what you should do is whenever your opponent makes a move like this, if you have something that you think you can get a clear advantage of, now it makes sense to break tension. Because if I didn't, they might take and then take on c4, right? They had a threat. And now I can jump my knight into d5 here. And the knight on d5 is a very pretty pony, I think they call it. Also, I think I could have taken this guy. That was a blunder on my part. I should have spent a little bit more time. Again, be materially minded. What does your opponent no longer do? Sometimes it happens, guys. I apologize. Definitely should have been a little bit more cautious there. That was very silly and silly. I was going to say stupid, but I'm trying to say stupid less. Oh yeah, my girlfriend got me, or chose the, no, I don't know if she got me this shirt or like she helped me pick it out, but I love this shirt so much. It's just like, it looks so cute. I don't know. What can I say? It looks kawaii. So I could play h3 at a moment. I would rather play bishop c3 instead, bringing the bishop to the long diagonal. And I could have maybe done this before, but the knight was in the way. So now the idea behind bishop c3 is I want to play some sort of h3 where if they ever go back to f6, I could end up taking on f6 with the bishop, not with the knight, because if they take back, we actually end up winning the queen. I'm just trying to improve every single piece, but what's one last piece that we haven't done anything with yet? Right, we're going to stick to the principles. I already messed up once in this game with not taking the knight. Very silly of me. But there's other things we can do. And we can improve the rook. So there's two ways we can do that. We can play rook to e1, which is a good move in order to just defend the e4 pawn further. But does it need to be defended? It's hard to attack, actually, isn't it? The thing is, if they try attacking e4 again, there's knight c7 attacking the queen and the rook. The only way they can add another attacker is by, again, putting another piece on the e-file, which it'll be vulnerable to attack with knight c7. Or knight to f6, where we can just exchange it and ruin their pawn structure after pawn takes f6. So therefore, our rook doesn't need to come to e1 because e4 cannot be attacked sufficiently. Therefore, I'm looking at a different way to attack. They could try something like rook to g6. I'm not really too concerned. I think we have threats in the position where we can make their position extremely uncomfortable. And that's with the move a4. So a4, I'm just trying to play a5 and open up my rook in kind of a unusual way, I guess you could say. Because instead of trying to move it into a central file, generally it doesn't matter if a rook's on like covering a central file or a flank file, as long as they're on something that's open or semi-open and they have targets to attack, right? Like a rook on a1 can be just as good as a rook on the e-file as long as it's doing something important, right? Maybe deciding what is important is going to be the hardest part. So rook g6, I was thinking of the move f5 here, forcing either rook h6 or rook g5. And after that, we could play bishop to d2 and make the piece a little bit more awkward. Also, I like e5 because if ever knight to e5, I'm really happy about taking that piece off because, again, these types of exchanges will help me. So I'm thinking of playing, yeah, I think f5 is actually a really reasonable move because they don't really have many good options. And I'm still going to be playing a5 anyways to open up my rook. I'm really kicking myself over not taking their knight earlier. I feel really silly about that. That would have been something where I had assumed they'd instantly resign. But it's okay. That means we get a game where we have to see how does one convert with a piece up. And the thing is, all I'm doing is I'm just keeping my space advantage. Again, when you have an extra piece, the advantage isn't that, oh, I have to checkmate them in one move. No, it's just that I control more squares than they will, naturally, right? Each piece controls a certain amount of squares at their maximum and their minimum. Like this knight controls 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. This rook, not really as many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the idea of having more material is you just control more. So that's what you do. You just keep controlling more and more. And eventually it becomes too much. So I'm thinking I can take on G6. But I'm also thinking of taking on B6 because I feel like they have to respond to it. But they can't. The problem with that, A takes B6 here, is now Rook A8 looks like it's unstoppable checkmate. And when we look, we can see that because we notice that whenever there's a bishop covering the long diagonal, and then there's this fianchettoed structure, when we play Rook A8 check, King H7, there's actually Rook H8 with checkmate, because the H8 square is covered by the bishop. So after Rook A8 check, I'm assuming King H7 will be played. The queen can also block. But after King H7, it will be checkmate in one on H8. Yeah, so good game. I think the only mistake I made there, again, was not taking the knight, which was a very silly decision. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with how the game turned out. I don't think we made any serious errors. Everything felt good here. H6 was a little slow and maybe unnecessary. And also, I'm very worried about them giving up the long diagonal like they did, and then also opening it further with a move like B6. Generally, in these positions, if you're trying to go for some sort of kingside attack, yeah, maybe something like Knight C6 is a little bit more natural first. And you can still go for your kingside stuff, but maybe play... There's actually a really effective idea here of playing something like Rook B8 even, with the idea of B6 and Bishop B7. Just trying to neutralize this bishop on G2. But the problem is, after they played Bishop to E6, my senses immediately started going off that B7's not defended, and we should be looking for tactics. For me here, it wasn't enough, because after a move like Knight takes E5, takes, and taking on B7, they could play Knight D7. And here, we do win a pawn, and this is not a pawn I would take, because, well, technically it's not a pawn, it's a rook for 2 pieces, but we got 2 pawns out of it. This is one of those material imbalances where it says we're up a pawn, but it really doesn't feel like it's advantageous, because when we look at it, they have Bishop H3 coming, they have Knight G4 coming, H5, H4 maybe. Let's check the evaluation, and yeah, this is significantly worse for white, and this is not surprising whatsoever. This was something I would immediately avoid without much thought, despite the fact that it's technically a material like increase. The thing is, another thing I would like to mention is I'm a firm believer that in most positions, the 2 pieces are going to be better than the rook. Therefore, even if we get a pawn out of it, I'm still going to go for the 2 pieces versus the rook instead of the rook. And it's mainly because it'll only be really effective in something like the endgame. If we can get into an endgame where we're up 2 pawns, then yeah, of course, the rook win 2 pawns versus the 2 pieces is really the only side that has winning chances. But at the same time, we got to be really, really cautious of making those types of exchanges really early on, right? We're getting rid of 2 of our only developed pieces and developing our opponent even further after Knight takes E5, right? If we just look at this, we got rid of this piece, and now all of a sudden, all of their kingside or queenside is developed. They are attacking the light squares with great effect, and we can see why white would be worse here. But after C4, again, trying to make D5 something that might be a little bit less pleasant for them to play. This is essentially just like a Sicilian, but they got like some sort of Maroczy bind where they didn't trade the D pawn for the C pawn. And after H6, Knight C3, again, you got to be thinking about this diagonal. Like, just because this tactic doesn't work right now, doesn't mean in the future it wouldn't be an effective move. And that's exactly what happened in the game, right? After A3, castles, and B4, my opponent played B6 instead of thinking of other moves. Like, I think it's reasonable to look at something like taking and trying to go for something like D5. They could also try something like... knight to a6, where it's unclear if I want to push the pawn because this closes down the side where I'm potentially better. Of course, this looks okay for white. Anyways, yeah, so b6 is just a huge mistake, and engine's gonna shoot up naturally, and after knight takes e5. Actually, knight g5 is also recommended. I like knight takes e5 because it also takes a pawn. And after knight to d7, knight c6 comes, we take, and yeah, we take on a8. And again, it's not even best move. Here, f4 is recommended more. And that's interesting because mainly the idea is just to get so much space, and we're also up a pawn. But I want to be materially minded and take the exchanges when I can. But again, I'm not going for imbalances that could be disadvantageous, which is again getting the situation where maybe they took on e5 and we took the rook, losing 2 minor pieces for a rook, losing our development, which could be something that negatively affects us during the game because, hey, we're giving up our development to make a exchange which is imbalanced that might not actually even favor us in the first place, even if we get like a pawn out of it. That's like the only exception, I think, is generally you want to go for the 2 pieces versus the rook. If you had to choose one side, choose the 2 pieces, even if it's a pawn or 2. And yeah, there's actually a tournament game I had a long time ago against, I believe, Nolan. I'll link that in the description of this one if you want to check that out, where I actually made the mistake of thinking I couldn't go into that as black, but it was like the only winning idea, going down a few pawns. But if I gave up that exchange for the 2 pieces, then it would have been an excellent position, completely winning. That's going to cover it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.